welcome to the second edition of our wonderful, I think I call it a natter, opportunity to natter and have a wonderful conversation with inspiring people in the housing sector.
Yeah, I think our official title, Olu, may be Housing People. I don't know. But anyway, I'm really excited for our second episode and the guest we've got today, Charmaine. I think she's going to be amazing. She was one of our inspirational Women in Housing winners. So yeah, really looking forward to speaking to her.
Great stuff. So let's bring it on.
Well, hello, everybody. Should we do some quick introductions? My name's Sasha Deepwell, and I'm Chief Exec of Irwell Valley Homes.
And I'm Olu Olanrewaju. I'm the lead director for Altair International, and I'm also the chair of Leadership 2025.
I'm Charmaine Simei, Director of Customer Experience and Communities at the Longhurst Group. Hi.
Charmaine, we are so delighted to have you here today. Our Housing People, I don't know what we call it, Olu, a vlog or whatever we call it, but it's all about showcasing the inspiring people that work in housing. And we sort of came across you as an amazing contributor to the Women in Housing Awards. And that was the background to having this chat with you today, Charmaine. Olu, I don't know if you want to say anything and maybe start the...
Let's get going. I think talking about names, you're right. I don't think we're official name, but I'll just say Natter with Inspire People. That's my take of it.
Yeah. I can do Natter.
But if we can just get going and just ask you the question, what motivated you into getting into housing? Really? Yeah.
Okay. When I left school, I went to art college. I was really into fashion, and I grew up in Peterborough in Cambridgeshire, and I managed to get lucky enough to, at the time, end up getting myself on a traineeship with the British Designer of the Year at that time in London. So I moved to London at 17. And let's just say London's a shot in the arm. And I started noticing homelessness for the first time. And obviously I was working in high-end fashion, Olympia shows, Chelsea Barracks, and I grew up with quite a left-wing father, went on marches with him when I was a child for ANC and stuff like that, and it was all a bit incongruent. I couldn't get my head round what I was doing or whatever. And when I was about 19, a school friend of mine, who I hadn't seen since school, I found out that he had been found dead in a doorway in London. He didn't come from the easiest background. And I think these were all seminal points that just end up landing with you. I went to university, social policy, psychology, and I didn't know where it was going to come out. I thought it's either health, education, or housing. They were always those three tenets that I knew that were the key things behind social justice, and so I knew I was in the arena. Lived in Tottenham at the time, and I thought, getting on the bus on the way home from uni, I used to think, I haven't got the crowd control skills to be in a classroom. I can't do that. And housing, I did my dissertation on the phenomena of homelessness in new towns such as Peterborough. And I came back to my hometown and saw a totally different side of it. And I guess I got the bug from there. So I'm 52 now, and I've spent over half my life in this field.
That's amazing, Charmaine. And I really understand the motivation that you say there. I think what got me into housing also was somebody who had actually committed suicide and had severe mental health issues, but compounded by really poor and insecure housing. And so that's really, really interesting to hear that. So having got into housing, which is quite an interesting thing to do, I'd be interested to hear how you sort of got your first job in housing, and also what's kept you for so long in this field.
When I graduated back in 95, there was a recession on at the time. I think it was the Gulf War or something. But anyway, it wasn't a great time for graduates getting jobs. So I ended up becoming a community service volunteer. I had a little, bed sit. I think my rent might have been paid. I pretty much got what was at the time dole money, but I worked full time. It was one of the best jobs I ever had. I thought I had a great, seat of learning at university, and then I went into this role in a young person's hostel, and boy, that's a whole other level. I don't think I understood poverty of aspiration at the time. I just didn't, and so that was one of the best jobs I had, and I just knew that there was no going back after that, really. After that first role. And I think when you're not on a payroll, the boldness that you have, the questions that you ask, I always, try to dip back into that spirit I had quite early on, which is harder to maintain as you move through. So sorry, I don't know if I heard the second part of your question. What's kept me? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah, because you've obviously got a massive social conscience, and that's been a real driver for you, which I totally relate to. But then I'm wondering, how you've sort of progressed your career and what's kept you in the sector.
That I genuinely believe of the transformational power of good, secure, affordable housing. I don't think it matters where I work or what role I have. That's my golden thread. And it's always been there. It's always been there. And whether I didn't sleepwalk into this field, but that's always what's kept me going, is just keep your eye on the horizon, hold your nerve, and this is where you're meant to be. This is where you're meant to be. And I believe it's a fundamental right. So yeah, we might not always get it right, but you've got to keep trying, you've got to keep showing up.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very powerful statement, and clarion call, really, in terms of why a lot of people stay in housing. And I think you've already started giving us a sort of a glimpse. You're sort of like peeling like an onion of who you are, and your background and your motivation. But I think it would just be useful, and we should have asked you at the beginning, to just tell us about yourself, because I think I'm intrigued now about who is Charmaine, just what your influences have been, what your makeup is, and what your life is outside of the work as well, because that's also fascinating as well. I think it's just a picture of your son behind you. So we want to know more about it.
Okay, I'm a 50-plus-year-old mother of two. Live with my living in sin with my partner for 20 odd years. And I am the daughter of immigrant parents. My mother is Anglo-Indian, and my father is from St. Lucia, from the Caribbean. So that always gives you a bit of a prism in and of itself. What about me? I'm just trying to think. I don't know what's interesting about me, or what's. I think, like I say, I think that piece around social justice has just ended up dominating my life. I don't know whether it calls you or you call it. I don't know, but I think my background with my parents and my father, just being really quite into civil rights when I was quite young, and the whole kind of ANC movement around, you know, the freedom of Nelson Mandela, those formative years when I was growing up, and you know, all my dad's heroes were kind of anti-heroes of the time, Arthur Scargill and all the rest of it. So I kind of grew up with that backdrop. So when I wanted to go into fashion, my father was outraged. That was a bourgeoisie pursuit. It's not something that the proletariat would engage with, and all this kind of, and I guess, yeah, eventually came back round. So guess it was always going to be this kind of driver. So yeah, average working mum, at the end of the day, trying to juggle it all, and trying to be a good mum at the same time as being compelled by this all-absorbing sector, because it's not a 9 to 5.
And in a way, that's leads to my next question, which is, how do you protect yourself? I suppose, how do you avoid burnout? Because I think, as you rightly said, there's a lot there that is driving you. There's significant challenges in the job itself. How do you protect yourself and heal yourself and renew yourself to get yourself going, really?
Okay. I don't know that I've always been successful. You hit walls at times. You know, sometimes some of these intractable problems that we deal with, you think, if I work harder, if I work faster, if I work longer, you can turn this around. And, you know, that's not always possible. I think holding that, you know, holding that belief and holding that golden thread, your own social purpose, is what sustains me. And just you know, there have been points along the way, Grenfell, and recently, I suppose, with young Awab Ishak, it's been tough. You step back and you think, I've given over 2.5 decades of my life. What have we done? Have we moved forward? So there are times where you have a bit of a existential crisis about what you're actually contributing to, and that's hard. Then that becomes hard to sustain yourself and keep motivated. Burnout is a constant challenge. I think you have to revisit. I have to revisit 3-4 times a year. I'm not an expert on that piece. You might have to ask another one of your natterers. They might have the key. I don't have it.
Yes.
It's really tough, isn't it? And I'm so pleased you've expressed that, because I think you've expressed something we're all really struggling with at the moment. Because I was going to ask you about lowlights, but I think you've probably touched on some of them there. So maybe if we try and cheer ourselves up a little bit now, maybe we could talk about some of the best moments that you've experienced during your career in housing. I'm sure there've been many, but maybe you could pick out 1 or 2 highlights from your career.
Yeah, I think just before I go to best moments, just wanted to say, after Grenfell, I must have been in housing for about 20 years at that point. And I picked myself up at some point, because I used to live in a tower block that you would have been able to see Grenfell for, not in Notting Hill. And I had been in housing 20 years. And at that point, I decided to take this CIH accreditation route. And it was almost like I needed to, what do you say, reaffirm my vows that I didn't even know that I'd taken in the first place. But I had to have that moment to say, yeah, just confirm to yourself why you're here. But that was really important for me to do that after that.
Did it help? Did that help you?
Yes, it did. Yes, it did.
Yeah.
I'm not a religious woman at all, but this is probably about as you know, as I said, living in sin for 20 years, etc., ad lib to fade. You know, that's not my gig per se. But yes, Yes, it did. I needed that rite of passage at that point. That was after 20 years, but it was important.
I totally get that, because I think it's really important to refresh yourself, and you're never too experienced to learn more and to hear more. And, you know, part of what we're trying to do with this is to bring all those different voices and, you know, put them out into the sector, because we don't often hear from real people working in the sector. So I'm really appreciating what you're saying about that. So what about some highlights then, Charmaine?
Oh, highlights. There are quite a few, but I think probably about, I don't know now, 14 years ago, I was a area manager of supported housing, and I've always been embraced and supported by leadership teams, you know, because they may see me as creative or having a particular type of kudos in an area or whatever. But I was, for a long time, I was never the trusted pair of hands as such. You know, you can go over there and do that wonderful stuff, that's great, but never the trusted pair of hands, for reasons we won't explore on this call today. Olu's laughing and knowing why. Basically, I was inspired by Thames Reach at the time, who'd done this a GROW program, giving real opportunities for work, and it was about specifically targeting ex-homeless service users and putting them on a training program and bringing them into residential accommodation as project workers. And I think the chief exec that I was working for at the time was probably relatively risk averse, and I certainly wasn't the spokesperson to be pushing it forward. So I got a few people on my side that I knew were probably more trusted voices, and we got the thing off the ground. And I was just really, I don't know, it impacted probably a handful of people in the grander scheme of things, but I was just really proud of that piece of work. And, you know, there are a number of those individuals today that I know that have gone on to have good careers in housing and continue to be that authentic voice wherever they've ended up being.
Is there a particular song or music, book or movie that you go that I think that would probably, let's just close the conversation with that we can all go back to and say, okay, yeah, that's Charmaine Oliver.
Oh God, was that part of the deal? Oh
no,
God!
Didn't give you any warning about that, Charmaine. Oh. He always does this to people, throws in a curveball at the end.
A book. Let me think. Oh, there's so many. Probably one I've read a few times. So at the back of my head, so no media training. Yeah. Probably the color purple. Is probably one that I've read a few times. Film wise, I used to love Goodfellas.
Oh, brilliant. Great stuff.
Yeah.
And for the young ones out there, you have to Google Goodfellas, by the way.
Oh God, yeah. And music. Oh, there's so many. Yeah, I don't know what to say. Music. Probably Redemption Song is probably one that's
lovely choice. Yeah, deep meaning. Sasha, do you want to round us off?
Yeah, I mean, just to say thank you to Charmaine for a wonderful interview. Absolutely loved everything you said, and I think you articulated it so well. It's really going to resonate with our audience. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you both for inviting me. And it's a real honour and pleasure to honestly to have met you both. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Take care. And all
okay. Yeah, thank you so much. Bye for now, Charmaine.
Bye-bye.